It's interesting, though, to be so similar, isn't it? And I always thought, okay, Hunchback of Notre Dame. You also got your quarterback and your halfback of Notre Dame.
What's a fucking cathedral?
Obviously, I know. I'm just saying. It's interesting, the coincidence. What? You're going to tell me you never pondered that? The back thing with Notre Dame?
No.
Me neither, but wow, when we're at these end times, we like to look to the past. We like to think that someone first saw this coming, and not to place this in the here and now, but we're all quarantined in our homes. We finished The Sopranos. All we can do is look back, watch it again, and learn from The Sopranos. My name is Jim Scampoli. I've seen every single episode of The Sopranos.
My name's Jacob Burrows. I've seen every single episode of The Sopranos. Still feels really special saying that. And what a great time for a Sopranos rewatch. That's my only commentary on the current climate. It's been said before and it'll be said again. What a great time for a Sopranos rewatch. What we're doing this week is looking back at the whole series and sort of summing up some thoughts. And we're also going to be hearing from a lot of you listeners who've sent your thoughts in. You can, of course, send thoughts even after this, because we're going to do episodes, probably not regularly, but there's obviously The Many Saints of Newark coming out. And yeah, that's going to be great. And I also wanted to thank anyone who tuned in to listen to our sort of history coverage there that we did of The Irishman, sort of the crossover episode. If you found that interesting, there's more of that at showswhatyouknow.com. Just click Real History there. We talk about Gladiator and all the historical context of a bunch of different films like 300 and all sorts. But The Irishman sort of led us nicely into The Sopranos. So I thought that was a good in-between episode before we got to this wrap-up here. And yeah, it really is time to wrap the bag on this one, eh, Jim?
Yes. And I also want to point out, like, when I say in these times, I mean, depending on when you're listening to this, obviously, you could be well on the other side of this thing. But I mean, right now we're quarantined in our homes. Like, the timing of us finishing our rewatch is so perfect in many respects, not just the fact that, like, we have this pandemic going on, but we have a glutton of Sopranos rewatch podcasts starting. Also, podcasts that have the people that were on the fucking show. Thank God we finished, and we have our little body of work. We have our hook of some like you, Jacob, that was going along for the ride for the first time. So we're not really competing with fucking Michael Imperioli and Steve Sciarippa, who are rewatching the show. That's right, Christopher Moltisanti and Bobby Bacala themselves. Also, Adriana, if you'd heard on our feed, Dre De Mateo's also doing a rewatch. Thank fucking God. I feel like we're the head of the curve. I mean, we weren't quite at the head of the curve of something like some of the other earlier podcasts, but thank God. That's all I can say. Like, our timing was just so perfect. We finished it. We got to, let that simmer for a bit. Now we can still check in. We can still talk Sopranos, but we completed the rewatch portion.
Yeah, we were ahead of the curve. Now it's time to flatten the curve. As we talk about The Sopranos, it's so true because we couldn't even have started Cut to Black if this Christopher and Bobby show was starting at the same time or happening at all, even, and made women as well.
Yes.
We featured last week. So yeah, it's really great timing on our end. I say thank you everyone who's come along for the ride, and I mean. We're gonna have more stuff on this feed, but like I would welcome any suggestions on what shows to do next, but I would do so tentatively because even though we've been doing Cut to Black, it's always been part of the bigger shows what you know thing. Like we talk about it all the time. I don't know if you, dear listener, have had a chance to check out the other stuff on the network, but like right now we're talking about Westworld, something current. It's coming out at the moment, season 3. But like we're always jumping on different shows that we're interested in discussing, and The Sopranos is such a great and huge piece of film history that I know we're definitely going to speak a lot in like exaggerated phrases here, I think, because we just did a watch through of the whole show, but I do feel like it's a bit of a piece of TV history that we've done, and I would like to do other pieces of television history as well, but we are also like monitoring in real time for anything that's happening in the world of TV, and we've done so for several years. So there's a lot of shows covered at showswhatyouknow.com. But if you have a suggestion, I would very much appreciate it, either in a review, which yes, though you can still leave a review. Would be much appreciated. Or send it to us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com. We had a new review here from TMJ35 who said, "There's only one thing left to say." That's the title of the review. And the body of the review is "Best podcast ever. Katsana Malanga."
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Going back to what you were saying, though, doing this Sopranos rewatch has kind of really, well, just in general, my life of like watching TV and being a TV fan and wanting to watch TV. Never mind the podcast side. The podcast side I'll get to in a minute. But just in my life of watching TV, doing the Sopranos rewatch, and I think we've talked a little bit about this off mic, it's tainted watching other shows. And I'm sure a lot of these Sopranos fans that listen to our podcast can relate. It's hard not to be like, there's this new show everyone's talking about. Man, maybe I'll just watch The Sopranos, though. Or maybe, I don't really want to watch it. But also on the podcast side of things, it's turned me off a bit. Like, don't get me wrong. We just did a Westworld discussion. I did enjoy the discussion. And much like most of our podcasts, it makes me appreciate what I watched a bit more. But I don't know. It's made me want to lean more towards shows that are done and be like, all right, what other shows done? And we can just go and discuss that for a bit. So it's hard to say, but I still like to keep up with what's going on, some of the new things. But it's been a great experience having a show that's like, all right, well, here's all the show. Now just go and watch it and talk about it. Although it's a little tougher with some of the new ones, but you also want to stay ahead of the curve. So I'm in quite a quandary, if you will.
Yeah, it's hard. I guess, having come from not having seen any of it at all and watched all of it and discussed it, obviously, at length, I see where everyone's coming from. That's like, just rewatch The Sopranos over and over. Like, I get it. And I can definitely sense what you're saying as well. Like, because of the discussions we've had, you sort of get into how this show respects its audience more by not respecting it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
Like, by going like, nah, this story's like, it feels always like it goes like, nah, it's just gonna be its own, like, we're telling this story and ratings be damned or whatever. I'm sure that's not totally true in execution, but it just feels like, nah, we're not gonna do what's expected, and that doesn't mean a big twist. That means not doing a big twist, and we've talked about this at length as well. But yeah, it's just something that I can't recall seeing in other shows. We always draw the parallel to Breaking Bad of like, Breaking Bad is a great show, but it plays by the rules, and The Sopranos was like looking at the rules of television at the time and going, nah, we're not interested in doing that. We're going to do something great instead.
Yeah, and not to pick, I don't want to get too into this, and I don't want to pick on Better Call Saul too much, but coming off of like finishing Sopranos and then getting back into Better Call Saul, which is a great show. Better Call Saul is a great show, but it's such a different take coming out of like being in a Sopranos mode, and in addition to it also being a prequel, which already has its own baggage, because spending a lot of time like explaining things that don't need explanation. And Sopranos is so much about being like, who gives a fuck? Like, but Better Call Saul is being like, well, you remember this guy? This is how he got his name. Or you remember this? This was actually this 5 years before. And it's tough to get back into that mode sometimes and not be like a little bit annoyed. And I can't blame the show. It's just, even going back to when we discussed the El Camino movie, the Better Call Saul sequel, the Better Call Saul, the Breaking Bad like epilogue or sequel, whatever you want to call it, because that universe is full of very intelligent criminals, like very intelligent, disciplined criminals that could work a day job and also run this criminal empire. And Sopranos is very much like, these are dumb assholes that are very bad people, but they're hypocritical and messy, and things happen to work out for them. So it's a weird, it's hard to go back and forth to that when you're watching one thing and getting into another. And again, I'm not trying to pick on those things, because Vince Gilligan, I love Vince Gilligan and all the people he works with. They're super talented. They make great stuff. They make amazing TV. It's just getting in that mindset sometimes is tough because, David Chase is his own flavor and it kind of clashes a bit, even though they're dealing in similar like anti-heroes and bad people and crime drama and stuff like that. So it's kind of like an interesting back and forth that happens if you're trying to watch one thing and then switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't seem like it, Breaking Bad is in part like it's evil geniuses going head to head, and that's like super exciting. But it's also like you said, these disciplined criminals are like, I do my job and I follow a code, and it has that feel, as we've talked about in our discussions of Breaking Bad and of course Better Call Saul. It has the feel of a Western where some people are just like, I'm the guy who follows the rules, but like the rules of crime in this case, whereas in The Sopranos, the thing is more, as you said, like, nah, they're gonna be like a piece of shit about it, and they're probably gonna do this crime, and they're probably gonna fuck it up. They're probably gonna do it real publicly, but they're gonna get away with it because they're just gonna threaten the witnesses and maybe kill one of them. I don't know. Like, it's kind of like, nah, the world's a bad place, and it doesn't matter. Like, they're gonna win anyway, but then they're gonna die, and I don't know. It's like, and I say it in that voice, but I obviously like it. I think one of the big questions for the Sopranos prequel, The Many Saints, is gonna be, is it going to be similar to El Camino? Because the thing in our discussion of El Camino, which you can find at showswhatyouknow.com, I think is that we're describing it as a it sort of doesn't add much. It's sort of like a nice little epilogue, I felt anyway, but it doesn't work as its own separate thing. And I wonder if Many Saints is gonna fall into some of the traps that we see in pretty much every prequel ever made. That you just kind of go like, "What? What's your name? Oh, you're such a joker." Like, I don't know, I haven't seen Joker, but that's pretty much what I assume happens. I don't know. Is it gonna work or no? What do you think? I mean, not that we can say in advance, but it's like it's always scary when something is brought back that is pretty much perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very scary, especially it being a prequel, because prequels in general like really suffer from things like, if we're gonna have the origin of Polly Walnuts, I'm gonna be mad. I'm gonna be mad if they do that. It's like, what do you got? Walnuts in your pocket? Ah, Polly Walnuts over here. Oh, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, that gets a little scary. I'm very excited that David Chase is playing back in this universe, but then I still get worried because it is a movie, so you don't have the options of a TV show where you get to kind of expand on these characters a bit. But it also, so that limits it in a way, because it's going to be 2 hours or what have you, and then the fact that it is going to be a prequel. And you have to resist that urge to play out little winks. I mean, maybe a couple here and there, but I mean, again, this is David Chase. He was never really about that, but I don't know. Maybe movie David Chase is a little different than TV David Chase. Well, I will have to see how that works.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question as well, because my excuse for not knowing this is that I've gone in blind and everything. But like, what has David Chase been working on since The Sopranos? Like, do we have more of his?
The only thing I can think of off the top of my head was he did do a movie with Gandolfini that was about like kind of loosely based on himself growing up and like his relationship with his dad and being in bands and stuff like that. And like I don't know if it was like 60s or maybe the 50s or 60s or something like that. Oh, not the 50s. Yeah, like 60s or 70s. Let me see, because that was not Fade Away, I believe. I was trying to see if he write anything else in between there.
Yeah, I was looking at it now as well, and I mean, he has an impeccable television pedigree going back to the 70s. But is our next podcast going to be on Northern Exposure? Is that what's going to happen? Because we don't have that much David Chase stuff after The Sopranos. Like, the one thing on here is in television he did a voice on BoJack Horseman. That's like 10 years after The Sopranos finished, he did that. So there's a lot before then, but not much after. I just brought that up because I'm like, I don't want to be pessimistic, but usually someone who makes something perfect when they come back, especially if it's years and years later, I don't know. It's usually not perfect. And again, I don't want to get anyone's hopes down or whatever, but I think maybe going into something with lowered expectations is a good thing generally.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to watch Not Fade Away. I do remember watching it years and years ago. It didn't make that much of an impression on me, but I don't remember a ton of it. But I'd be interested in revisiting it just to see how it plays now. So yeah, but yeah, looking at it, he hasn't done a lot, and it's weird that he did this one movie. I don't think it was received that well. And then he didn't do anything else, and now he's going back to The Sopranos. It's like, all right, here we go.
Yeah. So that will be really interesting. But for now, we're still talking about standard Sopranos, and we have a lot of feedback to get to. So I was going to get in some listener emails here, unless you had anything else to add before then.
No, yeah, let's get into some listener emails.
I'm sure our discussion will weave naturally around these points as ever. So lots of people got in touch after our finale. It's really nice to hear from the silent majority of listeners, because we can tell there's people listening, obviously, and some of you get in touch, some of you leave reviews, but there was just kind of a flood of emails, so we might not get to all of them, but thank you everyone who wrote in. This is from Age in Telford, England. Hi guys, day one listener, been a fantastic ride, love every pod you've done, and despite some grumblings from others, okay, I say Jakob is alright, I didn't read this ahead of time. I say Jakob is alright, despite potentially calling me stupid for thinking Tony and Renata had Renata killed somehow. Okay, I don't think that now after my 8th run through watching after Kennedy and Heidi, I noticed a link between Chris and Adriana. I may be reaching, but those two's demise ultimately come after car crashes with Tony. First, Aid and Tony avoid the deer, going for coke. That convinced Chris that Tony was banging her, resulting in it making it easier for Chris to dispose of her once she came clean about Danielle. Then Chris's end came swerving. Kennedy and Heidi again after giving Tony a lift. I don't know if I read that sentence weird, but
it's
both
a little
died.
Worded weird.
Yeah, both died from a flawed drug problem / connection, both killed on Tony's dime. Perhaps a metaphor is in there somewhere, as life is one big road going forward, can't go back, roads ahead, etc. Plus a few of Tony's dream sequences involve driving on open roads. Forgive me if the link is tenuous, but I think it's the best I can come up with as an excuse to email you guys, and thank you for the great listening along the way, talking about the greatest TV show ever made. Finally, and most importantly, I'd like to say, cut to black, don't stop believing. And that's from Age, if that is how you say your name. Thank you.
Let me be clear. You don't need an excuse to email us to thank us. You could do that. You could just say, thanks, great show, and we'll love it and we'll cherish it. I promise you that. I mean, I think, obviously the long and winding road, I think that works as a metaphor, especially when you're doing dreams, and Sopranos loves that. The Adriana and Tony avoiding the deer and all that, I think that's a little bit spaced out from the death, but you're right, it does plant, not initial seeds, but it does, separate Tony and Christopher quite a bit there. And as Christopher points out at the end of that episode, where basically at the end, it doesn't even matter if he did have sex with her. It's just the fact that, it could have happened and that people believe it happened, and he has to just deal with it. And I mean, I love that Kennedy and Heidi, just bringing up Kennedy and Heidi makes me smile, because I think of the Sopranos session book when they're talking about how it's the two most important characters in the whole series, and how that made Jacob very annoyed.
Yeah, that's right. I like the thought. I didn't even think it myself, but it just the fact that they're both in cars with Tony shortly before they die. It's just a nice link up for me in my brain. Better than the eggs, I'll say. Better than the eggs.
Ooh, but come on, you can't put down the eggs.
I'll put them right down and I'll crack them. Nothing bad will happen to me afterwards. This is from Barbara. The Sopranos and Mad Men are my two favorite shows of all time. I've really enjoyed listening to your Sopranos podcast for the past 2 years. I had watched the show when it originally aired, and I enjoyed rewatching it with your podcast. As you know, Matthew Weiner got his start on The Sopranos before Mad Men, and there are many similarities between the two shows. They linked us an article that compares Tony Soprano to Don Draper. Anyway, I really enjoyed your podcast, and would love to continue with an equally excellent show. Thanks for making my ride to work enjoyable every week. And then she added in a PS here on some symbolism in the finale. The barber scissors that Polly received has been compared to the 30 pieces of silver that Judas received for betraying Jesus, inferring that Polly has betrayed Tony. What's your take, Jim?
Well, like I said when we discussed the finale, I think there's enough lingering shots and Polly reactions where I don't personally believe it. I'm on your side here with this, but I think there's enough there that I couldn't poo-poo someone for reading into Polly's character and suspecting him a little bit more, especially if you're like us and you do fully believe that Tony Soprano dies at the end and you're looking for more of a reasoning behind that, which I think we kind of decided that doesn't really matter who killed him. It's just the fact that he does die. But I think if you're looking for more of a blame or a through line to come to that ending, I think there's enough there where I couldn't sit and shit on it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's not a crazy theory. I mean, given everything going, like Tony almost killed Polly. The fact that Polly might, like, there's no way he would do it himself, in my opinion. But like, he might step aside if someone else is going to kill Tony. You know, I wouldn't put that past him necessarily. And like you said, we put Tony on the board. Like, we believe that Tony's fully dead. So if you think that, you might have a good time trying to piece together how it actually came to be. And like you said, our conclusion was it doesn't really matter to us. But if someone wants to do that, and if some signs point to Polly, that's fine. I still think barber scissors, I don't know. I don't think that they would have compared, like, I don't think that's intentional. I think that read can be there, and I think David Chase would say, hey, whatever you want to think, whatever. But I don't think that would have been intentional from his side. But then, again, doesn't really matter. Whatever you get out of it, it's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm warming up more and more to the idea of a potential Mad Men rewatch. I know Jacob's main kind of pushback on that, and I do agree with him mostly, is that we'd kind of be looking more for a similar vibe to what we had with The Sopranos, where maybe it's a show one of us hasn't seen because that kind of is a funner angle to work with. But I guess I'd be more so because I'm thinking personally, like, I'd be interested to go back to rewatch Mad Men now in a similar fashion as Sopranos, because I think I even stated it on the show. I always looked at Mad Men as very similar to some of the back half seasons of Sopranos, and you could totally see whether it be that Matthew Weiner affected David Chase a bit more, or David Chase affected Matthew Weiner and kind of set him on his path to do Mad Men type deal. But I think there's a strong link there for the way they play with like existential dread and stuff like that. And I did only watch that show as it aired, and that was another one that had similar breaks where then I was coming back in a little bit cloudy on what happened before. Again, not that it's super plot driven where you need to have this, oh yeah, this is season 1, this is season 2, but it would be interesting to go back and kind of be able to watch it in one sitting like that. And maybe I think it's clearly a show that is ripe for discussion. But then again, I guess the other side, never mind just the fact of like, we've both seen it. I'm sure there are probably a ton of Mad Men podcasts. But then again, that we could probably say that about any TV show. So either way.
Well, we haven't got the stars of Mad Men doing their podcast yet, which means it's still time. There's still time for us to do ours, because when they do theirs, we're not going to have a chance anymore. They're eventually going to do it, and we'll just have to hope that we get to finish our Mad Men one before they do that one. Generally, about Mad Men, I watched all of it. I pretty much binged through it. It was done, and I watched all of it.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, so this might be totally different on a rewatch, but basically, I like Mad Men a lot, and I, just like you said, I wouldn't even mind rewatching it. I probably prefer to rewatch it more than one episode per week. But I wouldn't mind rewatching it. But as it stands now, having just seen it once, I don't love it to the level I love The Sopranos. But then I probably wouldn't love The Sopranos if I hadn't discussed it every week. You know, I would still like it a lot, I'm sure. But just talking about it has opened up so much more of what's available in the actual text there. So that's one of my main hesitation is that we've both seen it, so it's not going to be quite the same. But it's also, I don't, even though we both like it, I don't think either of us likes it as much as we like The Sopranos. And it's
Yeah.
almost like if there are other podcasts discussing Mad Men, if they are, there will probably be the most super fans ever, that it's their actual favorite show, much better than Sopranos, and maybe they have more enthusiasm for it and more to get out of it and to give to the listeners who might also be on that level of fan for it. But that said, I would like to watch it again, so I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Good call.
But if we do a Mad Men podcast, it would definitely be on a different feed than Cut to Black. So again, I would urge you to go to showswhatyouknow.com. Sorry, I'm just going to keep plugging this. But there you'll find any feed we do on that. On this feed, I wanted to mention as well, we may get into other mafia related stuff just because it feels more appropriate, and especially when there's not much happening in the world of the Sopranos until the prequel comes out, just to float some ideas by you, dear listener. We were talking about Boardwalk Empire and some stuff like that is actually related. But if you have any suggestions for content, our email inbox is still open.
Yeah, and I think in some of these emails, people did call out Boardwalk Empire, and I mean, it shares a good amount of cast and also people behind the scenes as well. Because what's Terrence Winter, I believe, created it, right? I think so. And yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about that. Maybe wouldn't be as episode to episode as we did The Sopranos, but I think that's for sure on the board. I think that's something that would fit pretty well.
Yeah, and I think we were doing between the seasons, we were discussing various mob films and mafia films, and yeah, I don't know, and obviously Boardwalk Empire, especially in a similar way to the history episode we did with Mark and Michael when we talked about the historical context leading up to The Sopranos. There's loads of stuff to unpack there in Boardwalk Empire, and everything going on, and how did this thing that they're talking about, this thing that Tony's coming in at the end of, it would be interesting to examine the start of that too.
Absolutely.
Anyway, here's the next email. It's from Francis. I just listened to the Made in America episode of Cut to Black. The two of you do such a good job with the analysis and breakdown. You also kept me laughing. Thank you. Your take on most of the show being just fine if there was a laugh track is spot on. Like Jim, I've seen the first seasons many more times than I've watched the rest of the series, and I had a nonstop smile on my face those first 10 or so episodes. I remember them so vividly from my first few watches. If I had to make this podcast with Jacob, I could not have kept a straight face as he was trying to make sense and predict what the show would finally be at the Cut to Black. I was one of the sad few that held out hope that Tony Soprano was still alive, but now that he is up on the counter, I know for sure that he is no longer with us. That's really nice. I have meant to send you a few thoughts on nearly every episode, but I just couldn't get on many levels of analysis and detail that the two of you bring. I only had a couple of things to say. So, Vito Spatafor, who isn't Vito yet, cuts Chris in line at the pastry shop before Chris shoots the clerk in the foot. I do remember this one, Jim.
Yeah.
This may have been mentioned, but it gets to me every time on a rewatch. Yeah, no, this is a great moment to go back when there's just stuff like that. It also happens in our second favorite TV show, Gilmore Girls. There you go. There's a plug.
Nice. Good call.
We got it in there.
Yeah, because I do remember it. I think we did bring it up in one of the discussions. I didn't bring it up at the time, obviously, because how am I supposed to tell you, oh, yeah, this guy, or maybe I did do this. I hope I didn't do this, but maybe I did. Oh, yeah, this guy. Maybe I did one of those. Well, you'll see this guy again.
I think
one
you
day.
may have. I vaguely recall something like that. Or maybe it's just because I rewatched it. I definitely watched it on YouTube or whatever, just the clip. And I was like, what?
And then, what they got more here?
The next point here is, I may have somehow missed the recap of this episode, but when the Sacramones are planning Allegra's wedding and they talk about the food, the younger daughter flips out about how all anybody does in that family is talk about food. I certainly thought this deserved a mention because, yes, all anyone talks about in that show is food and mob shit. That's very true.
I don't remember Allegra saying that, although I'm sure it did. I remember specifically AJ definitely has one of those, or Meadow, one of the Sopranos kids, but I'm sure that wasn't the only time that happened. So I just don't remember specifically Allegra saying that.
Yeah, it's it's the younger daughter, so it's not Allegra. I think it's the one who's maybe.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, you're right. Okay, so that does make sense. But that is a common thing, and I think that does come up a few times, especially from the children, of like, Jesus Christ. I think even Christopher has one of those moments too, where he shows up. It's like a dinner with him, Tony, Carmilla, and Aide, and he shows up late, and he's like annoyed about something. And he's like, Jesus, food. And I remember he pours his wine in his soup and he storms away.
Yeah, there's definitely like a few nods there about how like, yeah, the show's all about food. And it's like, I mean, as I've come to understand it, big part of Italian American culture, I suppose. But it is like very interesting to see it in this show. In a visual medium, to see taste and food so represented as a sort of sense of how things come together and how family works and everything, because obviously it's, in a visual medium we usually get visuals and sound to do all of the representation, and just the fact that there's so much stuff going on with food, it's not surprising that it's, the show calls itself out on it a couple of times. Then we have the next point here. When Tony is in Vegas looking out at the sunrise, I always thought he shouted, "I did it," but you all seem fairly certain that he said, "I win." That flips my whole take on the big man from that scene on. It turns his killing Chris into a win for Tony. My take was that he was making a confession in the only manner he was able to, into the void. Do you remember that one? Are we sure he said, "I win"?
I thought he said, "I get it." Because I thought that's what he said. I thought he says, "I get it." Like he's reached some sort of, he's on his peyote trip and he's looking off in the distance and he's having this epiphany and he finally kind of understands. I don't know if he's like the meaning of life or, but I do think we talked about how he's winning now that Chris is dead. Like he is specifically like in the casino. In the previous episodes, we're seeing him on a downturn, especially with his gambling. But now he's in the casino and he's winning. But I don't remember that. I thought that he said, "I win." I thought he said, "I get it."
I think you're right. I think he does say, I get it. And I watch Sopranos with subtitles because I'm a dirty foreigner. So if I said that, I'm pretty sure about it. Because I'm usually the guy who's like, what? What did he say? What? And I think that's a combination of probably not having the best hearing in the world and then also being a dirty foreigner. So that's I'm pretty sure on that one. But yeah, it is. So I did. It's an interesting take, though. In a way, he is shouting a confession into the void anyway, even if he's not saying that he did it, because he has all his inhibitions lowered and everything. Anyway, here's the next thing. Also from Francis. The actor who plays Silvio, Steven Van Zandt, is in an E Street band with Bruce Springsteen.
Yes. Yeah, he's his guitar player or something like that. I think we talked about that, but we didn't get into it too much.
I'd forgotten about that. Lilyhammer, of course, another show we need to discuss on this feed, very much so. Everyone go watch Lilyhammer. We need to talk about it.
And yeah, because Stevie Van Zandt, he's in Bruce Springsteen's band. That's why they'll have. Well, I mean, it's in Jersey anyway, so that's very Jersey. Plus, there's a couple times where I think even Christopher quotes Springsteen lyrics. Also, I love Stevie Van Zandt because, Stevie Van Zandt's wife plays his wife on the show as well, and they have Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, like I have. Blenheim to be specific, and you see a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel in one of the episodes of The Sopranos. I don't know if it's the same dog or not. It was 20 years ago. But yeah, all kinds of great connections to Stevie Van Zandt.
Absolutely. And finally, from Francis, I saw your cut to black coming when I was listening to the revisit of the pilot, and you still got me. Someday, I'm going to do a watch and listen side by side to get the full experience. Great work. Did I mention how much I enjoyed listening to the show? That is all. Thank you, Francis.
Great email. And I mean, not to get all David
So,
Chase on you or
yeah.
to give ourselves credit, but like there was definitely a time when we were like a few months out and we were like, oh, dude, when we discuss the finale, we'll be like one last thing, and then we'll just not say anything. We were very proud of ourselves.
Yeah, and I think I think I probably mentioned on the show already, but I got like legit emotional several months ago when I was like, I'm gonna say I'm Jacob Burrows. I've seen every episode of The
Yes,
Sopranos. Oh my god, such a delayed gratification on that. I'm surprised they didn't come immediately. This is from Mikey, who says, "Hey boys, thanks for the shout out a while back. Once again, I've reached the end of another rewatch, and it's great every time." What an ending, and congrats to Jacob on nailing it the first time around. I also truly believe we saw Tony die from his own perspective. They build up the scene in such a way that you come to expect the same camera pattern over and over again, except the last one is black. I think back to AJ and Meadow talking about the Robert Frost poem, I thought death was black, white too. Obviously, cut to white would have been a bit too obvious for a guy like Chase. I always thought the cat was actually Adriana. That's why it also stared at Chris. Also, there was this picture of her that seems to be a dead giveaway. And he links to a picture.
She's wearing like a tiger print or I guess like a cat print.
That's just a sexy outfit.
Yeah.
That's a super sexy outfit. Because tiger print, yeah. Tigers, sexy. And then he goes on. Either way, whoever it was, the cat was important, and the tiger at Holston's was added for that scene. That tiger is not part of the normal background at Holston's. What is Holston's?
Yeah, that's the diner restaurant place they go to at the end.
Okay.
Where Tony dies. Just saying it now.
There's a tiger.
Yeah, I do remember because when he first walks in and we have that weird shot where it almost looks like Tony's looking at himself because it cuts from like Tony looking into the restaurant, then it cuts to a wide of him sitting in the diner, but you can make out there is this whole like mural behind him. And I made a joke about it, but people have broken down like because there's like a football guy holding a football in a football gear. There is a big tiger face that almost looks like a varsity, like a team logo. There's like a library or something like that. There's like all this different stuff, like Americana, basically on a mural in Holston. So he's pointing out that I guess the tiger is something they specifically added. I mean, if that's true, then I guess they are pointing to something there.
Yeah, I think the cat and the death connection makes sense. Adriana feels a bit more tenuous, but then I'm not on my 8-3 watch, so maybe I don't know if that means I'm coming at this with a more clear head or that I've just not spotted the connections. I'm not yet at that point of putting things on my wall and trying to connect them, which is what we do when we watch Westworld. So another thing about the decor in Holston's is right before the cut to black. If you watch the guy walking towards the restroom, he walks by a picture of a white house, which is somewhat reminiscent of Tony's death dream, where he walked up to a white house in both of them, or his death dreams, he says. So both of them. Yep.
Yeah, because both of them, does he mean that one? I mean, obviously there's the Inn at the Oaks, which is the one that's all lit up and Buscemi's out front and he's trying to take his briefcase. And I assume the other one is such a great shot that's like, or sequence that's ingrained in my brain is when Tony's in like that old, like kind of like field worker garb and he walks up to the screen door and it's very haunting and you see kind of like an Olivia figure inside and he gets kind of like creeped out and she's like all in shadow on the staircase.
That's exactly the scene I imagine when he said Tony's 2 death scenes, and it's incidentally the only 2 dream scenes that I remember. So so that's the one I imagined as well. A lot of people have a lot of crazy theories about what happened. One that I read a while back, I don't buy into, but it's interesting. When Tony walks into the restaurant, you see him standing, then you see the quick cut, and he's sitting at the table, dead center. Some people believe that he's already dead here, and every day he has to watch himself get whacked. Didn't we mention this, Jim, or did we talk about it off mic? Because it sounds familiar.
Well, I mean, it is similar to what he's talking about. Chris has that dream. The only reference that comes to mind is what he brings up here is Chris had the dream that his dad had to watch himself get whacked every day when he had his near-death experience. But we may have touched on it. I forget.
Yeah, and then he also says, also the message from that dream, the one you mentioned, was 3 o'clock, and the shooter, after coming out of the restroom, would be at Tony's 3, that is to his right. And then, all right, now for some dumb shit. A lot of people believe Chris was a rat at the end because he was wearing a hat. Same thing they did with Jack Massarone, putting a bug inside his hat. I think the hat is just to close the character story, as he also wore a hat when he was driving Tony in the first episode.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that connection, but that makes sense. I thought, I don't know, hide his drugged out eyes? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it works for the drugs and the connection to the first episode, and people just giving away hats to Cleaver. Because was he wearing a Cleaver hat?
I think it must have been. There were loads of them going around.
Yeah.
There's also a theory floating around that the doctor who was at Carmilla's father's birthday party, Russ Fagoli, is Polly's real father. Okay.
That's hilarious.
If you remember, Polly found out his father was some asshole named Russ, and they both would have fought in the same war. You know what? I'm gonna pick this one, and I'm gonna buy into it. That guy seemed like a dick. Probably did it.
That is hilarious, and yeah, I love that. Like, there's nothing there to say it's not true. Like, again, I guess someone could come up and be like, "No, that was actually Polly's father." And you're like, "Well, I guess. I mean, his name's Russ, and he was a soldier, and he would have fought in the same war."
Yeah. The final scene between Tony and Polly at Satriali's is sad and a bit creepy because of the darkness of Satriali's. And some people believe the car you see go by in this scene is a, quote, ghost car, as there doesn't appear to be a driver. I would bet that that's just about, like, it takes a little effort to make a car seem like it doesn't have a driver, so it's probably all about how they edit it and cut it together. He does link it for us here. Do we have the technical capacity to pull that up, Jim?
Let me see here.
But then
Hold on, sorry.
Well,
Let me see if I can pull it up, and yeah, I should be able to put it in the YouTube here.
Obviously, it's a visual thing anyway, so if you're on the podcast, you're probably not gonna get much out of it. I'm watching it myself. I mean, it does look pretty empty. But then it does go all blurry because it is moving past the camera. So that's another thing. Just trying to pause it here. Oh. It does look pretty empty. You gotta agree with that.
All right, I got it up. Here we go.
Yep.
what the fuck are you gonna do? Hey, you don't want the job. You don't want the job. I can put Patsy in there.
Oh, it doesn't look like there's anyone in that car.
Yeah, but it's also very blurry, and there could easily be someone in the car.
No, there's someone. I can see their face.
Yeah.
If you look at my shot here, you can see their face right there.
But it's all blurry, Jim, like a ghost.
It is like a ghost, actually.
Yeah. I think we got to debunk this one, yeah.
Yeah, I think we got to debunk that one. When I froze it, I mean, yeah, it's just the car zips by, a little motion blur on there. So, I mean, it doesn't look like there's someone there. But when you pause it, yeah, unless that's just the back, the seat back.
I can put Patsy in there.
Yeah, it's probably a ghost. So, one last thing. Since you guys love the humor in this show, and this one took a few watches before I caught it, but if you go back to the episode of the Cleaver premiere and how funny it was when Chris chose to thank Tony and didn't say anything to JT, the even funnier moment to me is if you watch right at the end of that scene when he says enjoy the movie, you can see the director on stage with his notes ready to say his speech just as he's about to take a step up to the mic with a big smile on his face, and the theater goes dark and someone walks by and takes the mic off the stage. It's fucking hilarious. I did spot that, and it is very, very funny.
It's very funny. Yeah, it's a great moment. It's a great little goof to put in there as, yeah, he's ready to go, and then they just completely ignore him and just move everything along like he doesn't exist.
Yeah. And Mikey closes out by apologizing for another long email and says that I agree with Jacob. You guys should watch Lilyhammer. It's a fun one, and I believe it's actually Silvio's coma dreams, which makes a lot of sense if you've watched Lilyhammer. And he also says, have you considered watching and doing a pod of Boardwalk Empire, which we were just discussing? It wouldn't have to be every episode show, but it was also an incredible show based on history and would be a good filler until Many Saints of Newark come out. It also has a lot of ex-Soprano stars in it as well. Obviously, Steve Buscemi and a bunch of other ones listed here as well. So yes, we have considered that, and we may indeed do that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your email, Mikey.
Absolutely.
I'll move right along here to an email from Mark. It says, "Hey Jim and Jacob, great work bringing down the Sopranos finale. Reluctantly, I have to agree with your take of Tony being whacked at the end, but then again, we can never be sure. I think that it's really what David Chase intended all along. He played that to the maximum effect in the finale in terms of direction and dialogue, but I've also had this parentheses conspiracy and parentheses theory that he was hinting at this ambiguity in the episode title itself. You see, you can abbreviate Made in America to MIA, which of course is the combat classification, missing in action. That term's actually referenced in a previous episode, the Kaisha episode probably, during which Phil laments Fat Dom being MIA. It's mafia code for, yeah, we know he's been whacked, but we can't say it. Going even further back to season 1, when Pussy is helping Chris dispose of his first kill, he explains that while people might suspect what's happened, they'll know, but they don't know. They think maybe. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a bit carried away here, but it's fun nevertheless. Thanks again for a great podcast, and I look forward to more Soprano-themed shows. Don't stop believing. What do you say to that, Jim?
I think that what I agree. It's very fun, but it also completely points to him being dead as well. Like, because all those examples of them saying MIA, like missing in action, and even Pussy talking about how, like, you know, they know, but they don't know. In those cases, those people were dead. Those people
but dead. It's a good catch, I think, that the MIA, like, it's ambiguous, but also clear. Like, everyone knows, but they don't know. And that's exactly where we're at with Tony as well.
For sure.
So an email here from Dan, who wrote, I would like to commend you both on your excellent work on Cut to Black. I thoroughly enjoyed listening each week or so. I admire Jacob's discipline, and I look forward to your next deep dive. Have you considered Boardwalk Empire? The podcast market seems lacking in expert analysis of that great show. My other suggestion would be another excellent show, Mad Men. Again, thanks for the great work. That's from Dan from Vermont. Thank you, Dan. Yes, as you've heard, we've thought about it.
Yeah, I guess that's another good point. I haven't checked personally, but yeah, it does seem, I guess, not a lot of podcasts on Boardwalk Empire, because it is a really great show, and I don't want to say forgotten, but yeah, I don't hear it brought up a lot.
Yeah, let me actually Google Boardwalk Empire podcast. There's a couple, but yeah. Mad Men is just super inundated with podcasts, which is another reason that, like, everyone who's like a main fan of Mad Men, you've probably heard it. But again, can probably be said about The Sopranos as well, especially at this point. So this is from Leah, who writes, just listen to your podcast of Made in America. Great listen. Enjoyed your take and your take on the episode. I'd like to point out something that I haven't heard or read, and I'd like your take on it. When the scene at Holston's begins and Tony walks in, he sees himself sitting there. Okay, I think this is the same. Yeah, this is the same thing we were going into in the other email, where they bring up how in season 2, episode 9, Christopher is shot and goes to the hospital, and he tells them that his dad is in hell and seeing himself get whacked over and over. And it also brings up the same point here that he says, Mikey says Tony and Polly 3 o'clock. Maybe I'm reading these sentences weird at this point, but the whole point being they mention 3 o'clock a lot, and the guy coming out of the bathroom would be at Tony's 3 o'clock angle. So what are your thoughts on this theory? Thanks for your love of Sopranos, as I am a big fan too. So again, just touching on that same thing, do you actually give it any credence, this theory?
I mean,
or
especially the fact that I personally didn't pick up on it obviously immediately, but the fact that people are putting this together, I think it all works. That shot always kind of, I wasn't sure if I should just read it as something that's supposed to put me like at an unease, but that specific shot of him looking at himself always kind of throws me off when I'm watching it. And I guess I always thought it works really well just to kind of build that anticipation or that suspense that plays out, because the episode's almost over, it's the last episode, and it's just a weird little thing. And then with that and combined with the other edits, but I think there's some validity to what these people are talking about, and it does work and tie in. And it's funny because it does seem like that, like it's a memorable episode either way, the one with 3 o'clock, because I think that's the one when Paulie goes to the psychic and he freaks out and throws the chair and all that. But it does seem like if it wasn't for something like The Russian, people would be constantly being like, well, all right, when's 3 o'clock coming? What's coming up at 3 o'clock? I mean, especially in this day and age with Reddit, if The Sopranos was airing then, people would always be bringing it up. But no, I like it. It's not something that popped out to me, but I like this take.
Personally, I don't believe in it, and I believe in it. It's whatever you read into it. But for me, The Sopranos, all of the quote unquote supernatural stuff, it's always been in someone's head, right? So for me, watching it from a more agnostic point of view, I can watch the stuff when he's almost dead and in a coma, and he's almost walking into this house, and I can view all of that as symbolism within his own brain. I can view it as him sort of processing almost dying in a way that relates to his worldview and all of that stuff, but his brain is still functioning and ticking, and we're still in his point of view. This theory presupposes that Tony will still be able to experience things after he's dead. And I don't, in my worldview, that's not a possibility. And I'm very happy to watch a show where that is a possibility. I love a fantasy show, but I don't think this, unless I'm mistaken, unless I'm misremembering, The Sopranos never really gives you that. It never says that that's a thing. It hints at it, but it doesn't go the full way. Or
the closest they come to it is in this episode they're referring to with the psychic, because the psychic kind of brings up stuff that he wouldn't really know like that. But yeah, off the top of my head anyways, that's the closest they kind of come to almost being like, there is a spiritual or supernatural element in the world. But then again, you don't have to go down that road, but I'm just saying that's the closest they come to maybe confirming it.
Yeah. So for me personally, I think you have to kind of come at The Sopranos with a worldview that's more in line with there might be a hell or whatever in order to believe that, because I don't think the show does enough to show that. And that could be maybe that's not something one actively believes in, but just from cultural background and everything, that's the sort of thinking you have. For me personally, I feel like it goes against the cut to black at the end. The cut to black at the end being like, when it's over, it's over. That's what they talk about in that season. That's what he and Bobby says, and that they repeat. It's just black. There's nothing after it. So the idea that he's in hell and replaying it or whatever, it kind of feels like it goes against the general point about what death is. So that's why I don't really subscribe to this one.
I agree with the cut to black negates that, because that is basically, it's just, that's it. Dead and gone. Nothing else.
Yep. So another postscript from Leah here. You also talk about the possibility of Paulie flipping and going out to Butchie's crew because of the scissors, which is a plausible theory. I hadn't heard that before, but I'd like to bring up in season 4, episode 12, Eloise, Paulie kills Min because of all the money she has hidden under a mattress, and she stares. She stares at dinner. Stated? Yeah, she stated. It must have been what. She meant. She stated at dinner that her husband was in the barber cutlery business. So that's where I think Paulie has the barber scissors, and he just held on to them. Because whenever Paulie needs to get on Tony's good side, he can go into his bag of tricks. They always just talk about guys not kicking up their full share throughout the series, and this is just an example of Paulie not kicking up the barber scissors the moment he stole them, but later when he needed to, in my opinion. I think that's exactly as believable as the other barber scissors theory,
I
to be
agree.
honest.
It does work. I think it does still work. Although, I mean, it is funny because Paulie's whole thing was he had to get that money, but it's great that he not only got that money she had in her mattress, but he like dug around a little. Like, what else she got in here? Ooh, these are some nice scissors, you know? Like, who knows what else he got? More tchotchkes.
Yeah. So another email here. I think this might be the last one for the episode. It's from Teria, who writes, "Hi guys, I recently discovered your podcast while rewatching The Sopranos for the second time. I love Cut to Black and just finished listening to all of it. My boyfriend says you guys are annoying, but what does he know?"
Yeah, what does
you
he
tell
know?
him?
Why does he think we're annoying? That bummed me out.
Ask him which one is a blowhard douche, all right? We need to get your boyfriend's opinion on this, and leave it in a review, please. I immediately started rewatching from episode 1 once I was done. That's fun, yeah. That's what we did as well, and a great time for a rewatch, as we said, what with the current geopolitical pandemic climate. Since then, I have not been able to find a show that is as amazing. I decided to start Westworld since you guys also had a podcast on that. So far, so good, but obviously it doesn't fill the void of my beloved Sopranos family. Something I've noticed while listening to Cut to Black and Westworld Theories is that Jim, I believe, is always referencing the show that must not be named.
Oh, that's great.
It's driving me crazy not knowing what show this is. Maybe you have named it and I just missed it, but either way, I gotta know. Please enlighten me. So, Jim, will we reveal this? Is it a Voldemort-based show, or is there a different reason that the show mustn't be named?
You know why I'm going? Like, part of me wants to be like, you'll never know, but I really love that. Is it Teria? Is that her name?
Yeah.
I really love that she's doing what we would wish people would do. Is that she really liked our Sopranos show and is checking out our other shows. So I really appreciate that. I think that's super cool. Even though your boyfriend thinks we're annoying, and you went and checked out our Westworld show. I will point out, and I hope you don't like this show. Maybe you're a fan of this show. It's okay if you are, but to us, the show which must not be named is Mr. Robot, which we did try to do we tried to do a discussion on it. We have, if you go back into our archives, I think we did first 2 seasons?
We did the first 2 seasons, and we did them in quite a lot of detail. And I was never on board, I'll say that. But Jim, you eventually turned on it as well. Mr. Robot was a rough ride.
Yeah, we end up just not having a great experience because obviously if you're doing a podcast or if people are seeking out a podcast for a show, they don't want to hear someone complaining about a show they don't like. And so we realized we had to stop. Now, I don't know. Maybe that show turned itself around and maybe I know it finished this year or this past year or something. And part of me does want to go back and watch it and maybe it came out good. But even though there's a lot of stuff, I think even you liked about it, but there's definitely a lot of stuff I liked about it. It just, it became a little bit too frustrating and just not for us. So we had to move on, and it turned into, we did learn a very valuable lesson, is that like, okay, we should be focused on shows that we enjoy, because no one wants to hear someone complain episode after episode that they're not enjoying something. So it became the show that must not be named.
Well, the problem with that is as well that when we're doing shows that aren't The Sopranos, we don't really know what it's going to be before we start. And if we're current and we're on it and we're discussing a new show, it also happened with Legion. It's happened with other shows where we're going in depth on something. And then we're like, there's some people who really love it, who're seeking out a podcast where they love it. And we're just being as critical as we would be of The Sopranos. Like, the bar is so fucking high. So they're like, why the fuck are these two guys just meeting up to complain? And we don't enjoy doing that really either. So yeah, that's Mr. Robot. I genuinely feel like in a parallel universe, if I just had a slightly different brain chemistry, like, not saying I would be stupid or anything, but like I would have to watch that show from a different point of view and I might love it. Like, there's stuff in there that you can love, but it's also very much up its own ass. And it's like all the bad stuff from Westworld and none of the good stuff, in my opinion. So that's the show that mustn't be named.
And I think the reason why it became that is because anytime we would discuss another show and we'd bring up like a negative, we would compare it was always our go-to. We could always we found we were complaining about Mr. Robot when discussing other shows, and we're like, we can't keep
Yes.
bringing this up, so it's the show that must not be named, and that is the origin.
That's right.
That's a little bit more about us. If you only listen to our Cut to Black feed, sometimes we'll get into it on other discussions of other shows. Much like how you may have heard us bring up Gilmore Girls here, even though we haven't done like a full proper Gilmore Girls rewatch. I think we did the movie or the revival. Sometimes things that we like starts bleeding in, but then things we don't like also bleed into our other discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we haven't done a full Gilmore Girls one, even though we talk about it all the time. Basically, because similar to The Sopranos, now there's already been like a hugely popular one discussing Gilmore Girls, so we're kind of waiting for it to come around. We do one discussing The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is by the same creator. But like, if this, and again, not to push this too hard, but if this is the only one of our podcasts you've listened to, we also do have a Game of Thrones one, Gilead Gazette, which is about Handmaid's Tale, Stranger Things. We actually own StrangerThingsPodcast.com, so you can just go there and you'll find our podcast. American God, and then there's just shows that we've discussed here and there, like American Gods, American Vandal, Atlanta. That's just the one starting with A. There's a whole host of them there if you go to the website.
And I think,
Leah.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think we need to follow through on our promise, and something I've been thinking about a lot. And again, maybe if you're a big Sopranos fan, this might not interest you too much, but I would highly recommend it. And I think we're going to get into it. Is Cobra Kai, because we both love that show, and for whatever reason, we never even discussed the first season or anything. So we got to gear up for the new season, which will be starting. So I think that show's ripe for us to kind of discuss and get ready. And I mean, maybe if you're into Sopranos and you didn't realize, Cobra Kai is actually a very great show. And I think YouTube has it up for free now.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. That one's a weird one because I came back from season 1 and I was like, wait, why did I like this show so much? And that happens with a lot of shows when there's a gap, because it is kind of cheesy, to be honest.
Yes.
But then you just get into it again, and by the end of season 2, I was like, man, this is one of the best shows ever made. Even though it's that a revival of Karate Kid would be as good as I think it is. Leah just wrapped up there. Oh, sorry, no, Teria just wrapped up there saying, looking forward to hear your thoughts when the Sopranos prequel movie comes in September. I recently Googled the cast and was happy to find that James Gandolfini's son is playing a young Tony, and Gazzana Malanga is their sign off there. So
nice. That's
the last of the emails we're going to do. Thank you to everyone who sent in your thoughts there. It's, like I said, really fun to hear these, because I listen to podcasts as well, and obviously sending an email is kind of a high bar for getting in touch these days, when texting and everything is, these tweets and everything is the new norm. So thank you, everyone who took the time out of their day to do that.
Absolutely. Much appreciated. Thank you for listening. Thank you for checking out some of our other stuff. Thank you for giving us feedback. And we like to keep the discussions going. I would like to, we've already talked about this, but we want to probably check in with a little Boardwalk Empire, maybe some other Mafia movies, some other Gandolfini projects. So, don't unsubscribe. We're still here, and we'll still be checking in. So much appreciated.
Yeah, and besides what I mentioned as well, Jim has his podcast, comedy podcast at jimandthem.com, and I have awesomepedia.org as a collection of all my other projects. So if you want to check out other stuff we do that isn't discussing television, well, sometimes we do on there as well, to be honest. It kind of bleeds over. But there's those, as well as showswhatyouknow.com. But besides that, Jim, I just have one more thing to say.
Ooh, and hold on a minute. I wasn't ready for this. I completely forgot. God damn me. What's that?
Don't stop believing.
I like what you did.